Session. I'll call to order the regular May meeting of the Rappahannock County Planning Commission. And it looks like everyone is here, which is great. So thank you to everyone on the Planning Commission for setting aside time for this, and members of the public who are here. If you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Before we, Michelle, do you have a copy of it? Sorry. Thanks. Thank you. I meant to go to my printer. Before we adopt the agenda, just one small administrative housekeeping matter. Our April 20th regular meeting was continued until May 4th, and then we lacked a physical quorum on May 4th. So given that meeting was continued to a meeting that did not happen, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, as strange as it sounds, our regular April meeting of the Planning Commission.
Move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler.
Second.
And Ms. Ritter. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we're done with the April meeting now. I understand from Ms. Summers that the Agricultural and Forestal District Board lacked a physical quorum for their meeting that preceded ours tonight. And so in entertaining a motion to adopt the agenda, we will be striking the public hearings listed as items 3 and 4. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda with the exclusion of the renewal of the Krebser Agricultural Forestal District and the renewal of the Haskell Agricultural.
Great, thank you. The second.
Okay.
Mr. Kohler, thank you. All those in favor to adopt the agenda with those changes, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, thank you to Marlena Lee for the preparation of the minutes for March 16th and April 20th. That was a lot of work. Ms. Ishii, prior to our meeting, sent out some edits. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at them. So if anyone has any additional edits they would like to make, we should do so now. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to adopt both sets of minutes, inclusive of Ms. Ishii's changes or any other edits you wish to make.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose one slight change to the April 20th meetings minutes. The top of whatever page it is, Mr. Light noted that it would depend on individual application and language could be added to the applications that need additional standards. I'd like to replace standards with conditions. I think that more accurately reflects at least what I meant to say. I think so. Strike standards and make it conditions.
Okay. Ms. Lee, did you catch that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that attention to detail. Anyone else? Okay. Do you want to?
I move that we approve both sets of minutes as edited.
Thank you. That's including Ms. Ishii's edits and yours presented tonight. Second to Mr. Light's motion.
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Ritter. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay, we're moving right along. So first on the agenda, and everyone will remember this from our April meeting, this is a special exception permit application number 22-02-03, Swindler, and this is tax map number 42-4A. And this is a special exception permit for a conference center using their barn as a event venue. And we did schedule it for a public hearing primarily, I think, just because of the nature of the use and the possibility that neighbors might have an interest in saying something. And so that's why we're here tonight. And then Mr. Swindler procedurally, depending on the outcome of the vote tonight, will send it on to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation for approval or denial. And then the Board of Supervisors will hear it. I believe the timing is such well, I don't know if it'll be next month or not, but it'll go on to the Board of Supervisors. So with that, I will go ahead and open the public hearing for this special exception permit application. And if you wish to speak on this application, if you come to the microphone, state your name and where you live in the county. Thank you. And then once we conclude hearing from the public, we can hear briefly from the applicant, and then the members of the Planning Commission can pose any questions, and we'll wrap it up.
I'm Anita Ramos. I belong to Hampton District. I live just down the road from this property on Richmond Road. And over the last huge number of years in the past, I've had the people going to Maestro Maisel's Castleton Festival down Richmond Road in large numbers over the years. And you hardly notice them, truthfully. I'm not always a big fan of doing things in agricultural areas that I don't think are quite what they were supposed to be, but I know this is something that's allowable, and I don't think they're going to bother the neighborhood at all when it comes to traffic coming in and out. They have a very, very, very complete application. They should be giving an A+ for that. I've seen a lot of applications over the years, and this one is right there near the top. And that's the way they all should be. So you are a sterling example. And I think a good part of that is because our department is making sure that people get everything right. So I'm very pleased with what's going on right now so that we all have as full information as can possibly be had. And lots of pictures too, very good. So anyway, I would say this is a good thing to approve. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Anyone else wishing to speak about this special exception permit application in particular? Yep.
Ron Macklin from Jackson District, and I'm here to support the application, but I have a question as to how you got to this point. It's to operate a conference center, and when you go to 170-34, in the far right column, it's got an X. It says site plan. I looked through all of the available information online, and it's not there. And the way we're supposed to work.
You took 170-36, I think you're referring to the use table.
I mean, did I misspeak? Yes, 136, excuse me.
Okay.
Anyways, under public and quasi-public type uses, it's the first line quasi. And it's a site plan. And there was no site plan on BoardDocs to look at. And the way I think these applications should be looked at is that everybody has to do the same thing. And if the site plan is required, yes, the zoning administrator does have the option to say that one isn't needed, but that should be noted in the information that is supplied to you, that she felt for whatever reason a site plan would not be required. So, and this happens frequently on these applications. So, like I said, I have no problem with the application, but I'm assured that Jimmy wants to be treated just like everybody else. And if it's required, Jimmy will do it. But it wasn't required, and the question is why? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this application? Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public input portion of this public hearing. And I guess, Ms. Summers, do you want to, one member of the public mentioned the site plan requirement, but you do have the authority to waive that requirement?
That's correct.
Okay, and you waived it in this case?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Swindler, do you, want to say anything else, or you already, I know we talked at some length last time you were.
We did, and all I would say is, again, thank you to your Ms. Summers, because I probably asked 450 questions, and she answered them all. The application was complete because my questions were answered. I had a lot of questions. I know I worried the crap out of her by email, and she always answered the question. That's what, that's how it's supposed to work, so that's
Yeah.
great.
No, we appreciate that positive feedback because county staff don't hear it often, and most of the time they hear complaints, so thank you again for letting us know that. I'll just for organization purposes, start at the other end of the table. Mr. Schulin, do you have any questions or concerns about the application?
Could you pull up the map? Next one. Well, it's mostly the lot. All right, that's fine. Right here is a concrete culvert of some sort. Is that a well or?
Oh, no, it's an old, in the middle of the field?
Yeah.
Round?
Yeah.
Yes, it had a water line going to it. It was a waterer from years past with our cattle on that property.
All right. Where is the drain field and the septic for your house?
There is, for the house, it's in front of the house.
In front. Okay.
In the front yard.
Where was the parking? I mean, I saw the pictures, but I really didn't have a good idea.
Did you see the driveway, the circular driveway?
Yes, sir.
Right, and in that field where the culvert is in the middle of that field, when we hosted our daughter's wedding, that's why I started mowing that field. We use that field primarily for parking, also in the middle of the loop. There's enough space that I keep mowed that we did put 30 cars plus in there. But that field where the culvert is, there's some up and down in that field, but there's level areas. And I want to say we had 50 to 75 cars back there. And then we also have the field to the right of the driveway if you're driving up of it, the big lawn, which that's the last resort parking.
That was really one of my only questions.
Okay.
right now.
Thanks a lot. Mr. Kohler, anything?
Yes, I had 2 letters from nearby properties, and I forwarded one to Michelle, but I don't see it, but I just got the other one a few minutes ago, and they both asked about music, and one asked if there would be music outside, and I believe my understanding is the music will all be inside.
Correct. That's,
So that was right there. The other one did not favor amplified music at all. So those are the 2 comments that I received.
okay. Thank you. Ms. Ishii,
I also want to echo some of the things Mr. Makla said, but also that Mr. Swindler said. I really, truly appreciate the work of our staff, and they do a lot, and they have to do a lot of different kinds of things, and they keep up with an amazing amount of requests, and spend the time to work with applicants to try to make this complicated procedure easier. I do think it is a good idea and ultimately would make it easier on the staff, and as we consider further on the agenda, taking away the preliminary review period, at least as far as the ordinance is concerned, that having a really clear record presented at the planning commission level, first of all, where we see everything in writing and have everything checked off and have everything be consistent, would really save a lot of time. And I know staff probably does all this. We just don't always have the benefit of seeing it in the record. So I would also encourage that activity to the extent that staff can manage that. I think it would save a lot of time and be most helpful, because I also notice that about the site plan often, and my assumption is that the staff waives it, but it would be great to see it. I agree. On the application itself, Hearing no concerns from the neighbors, which I think would be my only area of real concern about the potential number of events. You want 12 per year, I think, if my memory is
Up
correct.
to 12 per year.
Up
Yeah.
to.
So that could be mostly in the summer months, of course, and as long as the neighbors don't find that burdensome, and apparently on the road, there's not a concern about that, that would be my main concern on that. So other than, the conditions that staff suggested and the conditions, I would urge us to include the conditions that you agreed to in your application, which I think are all good. I also think that, I think it's great that you have a VOF easement on this property. Am I correct on that? And I do think that is very consistent with our comprehensive plan, and if your VOF easement with its concerns and care allows this, then I think we ought to support people who have applicants who have made the effort to put things in a VOF easement if we can, and if it's a compatible use. So I appreciate that.
And I did reach out to them even before I reached out to you all to make sure. And actually learned some interesting things.
Right. Well, I bet you did.
It's always interesting to read the easement.
My property condition, it was a great one. They were very good as well. They were very, very responsible.
Great.
I think that adds to our protection, so thank you for that.
Thanks. Ms. Ritter?
My only question is whether or not you actually had any improvements on the land that were as a consequence of this application. In other words, did you do anything that changed really the nature of what was existing?
The only thing we did was made the driveway a little bit longer.
Okay. I only say that because a required submission prepared and approved in accordance with the provisions of Article 4, which is a detailed engineering drawing of the proposed improvements. If there are no improvements, then it doesn't seem to me that you need a site plan. So,
Yeah, no improvement.
Yeah, thank you.
Whatsoever.
thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Mr. Light?
Thank you. I was going to touch on the point that Ms. Ritter made about the fact that I didn't see a need for a site plan because of the lack of improvements and the fact that everything's there and we have photographs, so it's kind of, seems to be that we get more information than a site plan. I would just add, in addition to the quality of the application, I would point out that it's, one of the things that I feel makes me comfortable about this is that it's also circumscribed. We're not playing the 50-question guessing game about what the real intention is. So I thank you for that. I think it's a great application. I'm probably, half a mile from this, and have no concerns about it, and support the application.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Henry?
I think it's a complete application. I think the need for a site plan is not necessary because all the improvements were already in place.
Definitions of site.
The only thing I would add to this is that we have an upper limit here on guests at 150. I would suggest that the 12 events per year would apply for between 20 and 150 guests. So if they have somebody come in for a very private 10-person wedding that is going to be a quick event, something like that, that's really a non-event. So I would like to propose that it be defined as 20 to 150 guests.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah,
You have any?
No.
No. Okay. All right. I really have nothing, and I thank you for the complete application and appreciate my colleagues directing us to the language in Article 14 under site plans, because in fact it's explicit. A site plan will not be required for the repair or rehabilitation of existing structure, et cetera. So thank you for the complete application, and I'd entertain a motion if someone wants to put it forward and move this on.
I got a
Could-
quick
Yeah, go
question,
ahead, Brian.
if I may. What would have been the difference if he had asked for a convention center under, in regards to section 17065, recreation and amusement, that didn't require a site plan? Now, I wonder why you picked one over the other.
Which thing were you referring to?
17065,
what is it?
Yeah, it's 17036D.
Yeah.
Under the recreation, and then there's additional standards under 17065.
But for what would it be? I was looking at the definition section.
For what he's asking for.
A conference center?
Mhm.
Well, in the pregnant silence, I would say that's a good question about our ordinance. I'm not sure that it has any bearing on this application particularly, but I
No,
do think.
I
If he applied
see.
there, he wouldn't have to worry about a site plan.
Well, I see what
At
you're
all.
saying, but I think that, I think staff had, I talked to Mr. Curry about that actually. So instead of the conference center or resort is what you're referring to, it would have been under 136D?
Right under
Yeah.
recreation amusement.
Yeah, so the difference, if you look in the definitions section, just as long as you raise a question, is how they're defined. So a conference or resort is a use which provides lodging, entertainment, meals, etc.
Lodging.
Yeah, there you go.
For more than 40
That's it.
persons in a rural setting.
Okay.
And then the other, anyway, there's a difference in definition, and they had gone back and forth, but they decided it was more appropriate under that one, I think. So
Yep.
I just recall being satisfied with their explanation, but for what it's worth.
And I'd just like to ask to follow up because these were sent to me. I don't recall, but are you going to have amplified music?
We,
Indoors.
indoors, in the barn, and just by way of example, when we had our daughter's wedding, and we had DJ in the barn, you saw how far the house was when you drove up today from the barn. We couldn't hear it at our house, but it was inside the barn. Know that that's where if there's any music at all, it's going to be inside the barn. And I believe I said, I didn't bring the application with me because I'm heading out of town. I didn't want to take a chance on losing it. But I thought I said in the application that live music would be acoustic, that only amplified music would be in the event of a DJ. I'm pretty sure I said that.
I remembered something, I couldn't remember what it
I
was.
mean, we're not, what did they mention? They mentioned the Rolling Stones, but the Rolling Stones aren't coming to my barn.
Yes.
More Van Halen, more, no, but that's, if there's amplified music, because most people do use a DJ now for weddings. And that's, and again, our experience was, we didn't even hear it at our house, because they stayed up late that night partying, the DJ stayed an extra hour, and the father of the bride needed to go to bed, and I didn't have any trouble getting to sleep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just one other quick question is, I know when we changed regulations for tourist homes, we added, and this is not a tourist home application, but we did add provisions about having emergency numbers and fire extinguishers and such. That may not be quite as relevant to yours because you're right there, but just, that might just be something to think about is.
Well, and definitely, and certainly, ditto to the fire extinguisher. I mean, it's my ball in the end, if something happens. No, and there's, but we will, and I'll be happy to share it with the board, not that it's required, but yeah, we're gonna, once we get going, because I mean, we still have a lot of work to do, but we weren't going to do any of it until we knew we could get permission. And, you know, I have a very vested interest in making sure that building is still standing after every event. And, but yes, we would work closely with whoever ends up using it, assuming we do get a customer or two, and would make sure they had numbers. But as you said, my plan is I will always, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance that drags me away, I plan to be there whenever we have an event.
And just to make a distinction, you know, for other, as you say, conference centers that might be proposed, that also adds to my comfort level, in addition to the completed application and the VOF easement, is that this is right next to your house and you're living there, and so, you know, gives a comfort level of supervision and appropriateness. So I think, just to make that distinction.
Thank you.
Great. Gary, do you want to put a motion forward since it's
Yeah, sure.
in your district?
I move that we pass this application on to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of approval with the conditions of the staff report and those specified in the application, with the additional provision that the limitation on events applies only to events with greater than 20 participants.
Okay. second to Mr. Light's motion. Thank you, Mr. Henry. Any further discussion?
I'm sorry, Gary, Mr. Light, did you say with the conditions they agreed to in the application?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for your input. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, great, thank you. And I don't think anyone opposed, correct?
Right.
All right, thank you. So moving on, we'll see you again, and I'll see you again.
You'll let me know what the OS meeting.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you guys.
All right. Okay, next is our second of 3 public hearings tonight, and this is a special use permit number 22-02-01 Sun and Young. This is tax map number 27-56F. And this is an application for a tourist home under section 170-66K of our zoning ordinance. And what we'll do, we have a representative of the property owners here. Thank you again for coming up from Culpeper. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and open it for any public comment on the application, close it, and then if you have anything you want to say or add based on the comments or anything else of note, you're welcome to speak afterwards, and then we'll just open it to the Planning Commission for questions. And then procedurally, this will go on to the Board of Zoning Appeals with a recommendation for approval or denial, most likely. Okay, great, thanks. I'll go ahead and open the public comment period. And if you just let us know your name and where you live.
I'm Laura Morey. I am the daughter of Richard McNair, the late Richard McNair, just to let you know who I am. I'm here tonight to voice our discontentment, our disapproval with the allowance of multiple, at least 6 buildings on the 12.5 acre lot right next to where we reside, next to our home. We moved here, we moved back home. I was born and raised here. We moved back here in 2009 to take over our family cattle farm on Gid Brown Hollow. And since around 2019, I believe, we have slowly watched and reported building after building after building after building appear on this property right next to where we live. This includes campers, multiple, yurts, multiple, outbuildings, including sheds, barns, chicken coops, porta-johns, and the biggest of all, other than the home that was built, an accessory building, which to our understanding was permitted to be used as a, not as a dwelling. It was allowed under that the property was a non-spectator equestrian facility. The littering of buildings that have been permitted has frustrated us, saddened us, and upset us. And now the request to add a new feature to this of a tourist home elevates this to really a nightmare for us, adding multiple cars, multiple people coming from anywhere and everywhere, right up the driveway, which is pretty much right on our property line where our home is. Where we are raising our children. It's cringeworthy, really, for my husband and I. We are not in favor of this request and would appreciate really an overhaul of all of the number of buildings that have been approved on this property, several of which, by the way, are in disrepair. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming out. Anyone else?
Locate, we can go back to it, I suppose, but I'd like to know which property.
Sure. We live at 12213 Lee Highway.
So
Right before you turn on Old Hollow Road, right where Legacy Farm Store is, we're the driveway right before.
So is your house, which
Mr.
direction
Hall's,
is your-
Mr. Hall's old property.
Yeah, I don't know where
Our house faces Legacy Farm Store. We have the windows in the front facing kind of Old Rag, and then we have all the windows facing that direction onto that property.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
That's this one, okay.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this application?
That's what I was looking at. Okay, so you come.
Okay, I'll close public comment. Is there anything you want to add on behalf of the property owners, or do you just want to?
We were trying to get them to remove a lot of the buildings, the small buildings, the camper, the shed,
Your, yeah.
Well, so they realized they weren't aware that it wasn't permitted. There was a lot that they weren't aware of when they purchased the property. So they initially said that they would remove it, but I think now they would like to try to apply to have a permit for it. But the camper, they're willing to work with anybody if they need to kind of clean it up. So, yeah.
Okay.
We're in the process of cleaning up the furniture and freezers and things that they have out there, so.
And are you and your company doing all that work?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah,
We're working on it.
yeah, there's a lot of work.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been working on it for like 6 months already, just trying to clean it up and,
Really?
yeah.
Okay,
It's a shame.
okay,
Well, and also, yeah, they like added some things to the house and stuff inside, so.
okay. I'll go ahead and open it to questions or comments from members of the planning commission. Mr. Shulin, you want me to start at the other end of the table?
No, I'm looking at here at Google Earth, and it's not what I saw yesterday. I mean, it's just kind of weird. They're still in the process of building the equestrian facility or whatever.
Oh, I see, yeah.
I'm just trying to get my bearings to where the motors live. They're right there. Right?
Yeah, their house is right.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Kohler, you want to jump in, and Mr. Shulin, feel free to.
Well, I guess what I did drive into the property, and it's hard to get around because just walking up to the house, I ended up with a couple of ticks on me, so I decided not to spend too much time in the grass.
Yeah, we're trying to get them to know.
Yeah, and there was a path mode there. I don't know how it could be called an equestrian center, because it's not, but
I wasn't aware of it being a non-spectator equestrian center until Summer sent you that information. I don't think the new owners were aware of that either. And I can let you know the intent of the property, of the building, whenever you're.
well, it's a large building. It's probably like 2,200 square feet, something like that. It's got pretty significant size to it. And looking in the window, which is all I could do, it appears to be a large room with a kitchen. I presume there's a full bath.
Yes, there's a half bath and then a room in the sauna room with 2 stand-up showers.
Okay,
So is there also a bedroom in there?
There's no permitted bedroom.
there's a couple of rooms,
There's a bonus room or an extra room, but it's not a bedroom.
although it does have a closet, I think. And I believe it doesn't have a window, so I
Yeah, the
don't know.
window
Up
is
down
the
here,
property
yeah,
address.
I was, yeah,
As we,
okay.
so we were to make it bigger, we could make it a bedroom, but.
I don't know what to think about that building, but it was permitted, if I'm correct. It did get a zoning permit as an agricultural building of some kind. And I don't see it being an agricultural use, so I don't know how to deal with that yet. But the trailer or the camper or whatever that is down there, that's, at first I thought it was connected to a shed, but it's next to a shed. I can't determine what's going on there, if anybody's even living there or not. Doesn't look like it.
No, nobody lives there. It looks like it's kind of where they used to process their meat, is what I gathered from it. Because there's a processing building, and then they had like, they actually had a stove in the shed. They had a utility sink, they had multiple chest freezers and refrigerators. So I'm thinking that's probably where they processed and stored their meat.
I'm glad I didn't get any of it.
Okay.
That's
Well-
what all went together.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do have kind of a mess there, but I'm not sure permits are necessary for the farm sheds and things. Am I correct?
They had permits for, they did pull permits for the accessory building, large building. There's no size limitation on how large an accessory building can be, let's get that out of the way. There's no limitation on how many accessory buildings you can have on the property. They did pull a permit, again, the large building was to have a sauna, a kitchen, a bathroom. There was no approved bedrooms in there. They had a permit for gazebo, the chicken coop, the greenhouse, and storage buildings.
Do you have those photos? Can you pull those up? Just in case anyone didn't make it over there. That's what we're talking about.
That was a little while ago. It doesn't look that,
Yeah.
not that I would think.
Can you just flip through them? Thanks.
I'm sorry, what did you just say, ma'am? That it
I'm
doesn't,
sorry, I don't know if I'm really supposed to.
Go ahead.
that's
That's
okay,
okay.
I'm interested in
Go
what you
ahead.
had to say, if you don't mind.
As you can see, the building, the blue one, got almost attached to the camper, and there's a satellite dish on top of it. But yeah, there's lots of those tents and things, and
Those tents do
there's
not
not
require permits.
Wait. Let's get this thing get out of hand. We had a public hearing and it's closed now, right?
Yep,
Is it closed?
it's closed.
Okay. So, I mean, there's issues that we can talk about here that pertains to the use as a tourist home. But we're getting off track, and these things may not look pretty, but there's nothing wrong with them. They're not illegal.
Okay,
You can beat it up all day, but it's not illegal. The only thing we should be focusing on is those two buildings right there.
okay. You had some questions about the, Mr. Henry, about the accessory
Let me
building?
just give a little background here on this property.
Yeah.
These were two vacant lots. They were 12 acres each. They were created a very long time ago. Mr. Armstead, who had the property behind this here, which is the old Kilby Farm, bought these properties back in the 80s, had it for a number of years. When he died, he gave these two 12-acre lots to his granddaughters. And the lot here to the left of the picture we're looking at adjoins Roy's Orchard. And that was a beautiful, perfect lot, with apple trees, and it had a well on it, most beautiful site, easy to build on. That was the beautiful white swan. This one here was the ugly duck. And the reason it was the ugly duck is that the building site was way in the back, stuck up on the right-hand side of the hill with the drain field, because that was the only place they could put a drain field, because as you see, it slopes off, and as you move forward, you move into wet area, swampy area, and all that. So the guy that bought this, I guess, was Kyrgyzstan? Kazakhstan, one of the stands, anyway. And he could not speak English almost, and he was used to the outdoor culture of his country. So he came in here, had somebody from Luray build the main house, and then he started his Mongolian pony rides and Mongolian cooking and all this stuff. And they raised chickens down there, had a greenhouse, they slaughtered the meat, they had people come out there and had picnics and all this stuff. And then I guess his wife died and things went apart and they sold the property. Now this building was built as an accessory building, and I've been in it, and it kind of reminds you of a religious pavilion. It was set up with a commercial kitchen that was about half as big as this room, had a big gathering room, and then to the right, they had two saunas in the dressing room. It was kind of an awe to walk in and look at. When I seen it, it was not finished, and however, in the process of building this, the builder misplaced the building and violated the setbacks on the property by 3 feet on the back left corner. And subsequently, to solve that problem, they cut the end of the building off to solve the setback problem.
You're talking on the, as you're facing it on the left?
On the back left.
Okay.
First time in my life I've ever seen a setback problem solved that way, but it solved it. So, now the issue is that that building was never permitted for any residential use.
Right.
So it can't be part of this application. It can't be used for any type of housing, but any way in connection with this application. The only thing that applies to this application is the main house to be used as a tourist home. That's the only thing. So we get back to the standards then that we normally look at, well, septic, VDOT, and that's what we're looking at pertaining to that house. So that's what the scope of our work is here tonight, is to focus on that main house. The other thing is completely excluded. Am I right, Ms. Michelle?
Yep.
Now, I thank you for that. One of the reasons, though, I wanted those photos up, and I perhaps misheard you, but I thought when you were responding to the discussion of the yurt. I thought I heard that they were looking to do something with,
I think the owners want to utilize it when they visit, so they don't want to remove
Okay.
it. So they were going to inquire about, applying for a permit.
permit, okay, but it wasn't in, okay, now I'm clear.
Yeah, but
It was not in the
now
context,
it's permitted.
it was not in the context of this discussion for a tourist home application. You weren't saying they were looking to permit something in that group of little buildings that we were just looking at in the.
Yeah, we just included it in it so that the guests can use it when they're there.
Yeah.
You gotta say what your definition of use is.
Okay,
If they wanna walk down there and drink a beer, they can do that. If they want to camp there that night, that's not in
just
here.
because it looks cool and they like it on the property, but they won't be renting it.
So your application, really, what we're gonna be looking at is to use that main house. And that, if they come out of here with a recommendation of approval, that's what it's gonna be approved for up there. Nothing else to be used down in the field, nothing.
Okay,
No overnight camping, nothing like that.
okay. They may only stay at the top, at the main house.
And, you know, there's people all around you there, and people see, and you're kind of low down there, and people see activities. So if you do stuff to try to squeeze by, we'll hear about it.
Yeah, we won't do anything to try to.
Well, I'm telling you, because
Yeah.
you're gonna be telling the
Watch
people
strokes,
that
yeah.
are renting it, and you're in control of it.
Yeah, okay,
You're gonna have more control over this property than the two owners that are not here,
yes, yeah.
right?
Have something like
Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
But that's, I just want to be clear, because I thought I heard in passing you say something about something within that group of 7 structures or whatever, but I think Mr. Henry put a finer point on it, which is, that's not part of our deliberation.
Anything you wanna consider on that in the future has to come back here,
okay.
okay?
Although I believe they're identified in the application as being available for the use of guests, just not for residential. So I think the application is flawed in that respect.
Mr. Chairman, I did have some questions.
Sure, if you wouldn't mind, just one second, I will tell you, I'm just gonna get this out of the way, I don't support the application. Looking at the general standards under 170-52 of the zoning ordinance, I have a note in the column, I'm stuck here on 170-52A, the proposed use shall be such that will not adversely affect the use or development of neighboring properties and shall be in accordance with the applicable zoning district regulations. Location, size, and height of building structures, walls, and fences, and the nature and extent of screening, buffering, and landscaping shall be such that the use will not hinder or discourage the appropriate development and or use of adjacent or nearby land and or buildings or impair the value thereof. And in zoned ag, we have a 10-acre minimum requirement to operate a tourist home. This obviously meets that minimum requirement, but for me, just as one person on the planning commission, it's not the property owner's fault, but that the dwelling that would be the core use under this tourist home permit is right adjacent to the property line of the neighboring property, as we heard about earlier this evening. So this is a special use, and therefore it's a permitted use. It's not a by right use. And so when I look at it and I think, okay, 10 acres in theory should provide a sufficient land buffer for a tourist home type use of an agricultural property, that in theory land buffer to me is completely undermined by the location of the house that would serve as the tourist home. So that's all I wanted to say on this. I just can't support it. Go ahead. Okay.
So actually, that says a lot of what I was gonna say, maybe a little bit differently, but I agree with your reading of 170-52, and that the burden is on the applicant, and this is essentially a carve-out of the regular zoning that's allowed as long as it suits the vicinity. And I do, although nonetheless, agree with some of the other things that have been said. I think that there are 2 separate but related issues here, but they are separate. One is the accessory buildings, and the other is the application for the tourist home. But they are definitely related, because those accessory buildings, first of all, are in the application. Second of all, they do impact the overall use of the property. My concerns were, that the accessory building could that be used to host like large parties if you've got an Airbnb? That's a little hard to enforce, to not have that, even though we limit technically the number of people there. How would one enforce the use of the campers and the yurts, that they not be used? I do have concerns with this application. I think it's possible that, you're working on this property and you could, it's great. I looked in the windows as well. It was clear that there probably needed to be some cleaning up, but the house itself is except for the proximity to the adjacent landowners, would normally be something I would consider fine for a tourist home. We get lots of tourist home applications that aren't that different from that. But the overall question of the use of the property and the potential impact on the neighbors seems to me pretty high here, a pretty relevant question. And so in the current state of the property, I am concerned that maybe we haven't dotted our i's and crossed our t's yet to be ready for, in my instance, approval. But that's not to say that it couldn't be cleaned up and be acceptable. So that's just where I am on this. I think you've answered the questions I had with this. So that was it. Thank you.
I would like to go back to this placement of this ancillary building.
Yeah.
The plan I'm looking at shows it as being 49 feet from the back line, 41 feet at another spot, and 48 feet from the sideline, 48.8. So I don't see that it's ever been resolved, but Michelle, maybe you can help me on this, but I don't see that it's been resolved that it violates the setbacks.
It has been resolved.
It has
It was
been?
verified in the field.
Okay, all right, okay.
Ms. Ritter, do you have anything?
I was trying to figure out, the permit for the non-spectator equestrian center was for this building?
That's it.
The
one on the left
It's
is yours.
nothing like that, so is it?
Their description was, that I saw this week, was for the non-spectator equestrian building was for riders when they're done riding, somewhere to change and shower and relax, is what it says.
Okay. I guess I'm just a little confused about how it got permitted, but,
It was an accessory building.
Yeah,
That was
okay,
how it was,
got it.
that was how it was
Yeah.
defined. It was not, just to be clear, and which is Mr. Henry's line of inquiry, it's not an accessory dwelling unit, which,
okay, got it, yeah.
right, which sort of puts us in a position to de-link it from the house as part of the tourist home package
Got it.
for overnight accommodations. Anyone else?
I'm gonna go some more here. You know, this house was built on the only portion of land that a house could be built on. And the setbacks was built, are legal for the house. And so, our zoning ordinance has deemed that, what the setbacks are that provide reasonable protection for the neighbors. And, this house was built accordingly. And, you know, this property could have 100 vehicles on it, or tractors, equipment. There was nothing we could say about other than that it doesn't look good. So, I guess they tried to be correct. They came in and got some permits for some of these sheds and things. And in this building, they came in and got a permit for that. And I can understand where that's the first definition I've heard of what it was going to be used for, where people ride, come in, take a shower, relax, whatever, okay, accessory. So that explains what the use was when that building was built. So this comes down to a very simple use of that house for a tourist home. It's on 12 acres, it's over 10, it's close to 211, it's on a paved road, you've got a new well and septic, it's a new house. And this is a very plain Jane application here. And what bothers me here is that we're talking about, you know, turning this down, and we've approved many, many other ones like this, where that have been harder to get to even, or not as new in the condition of this. And, you know, this is fine, this house is fine, and using it for a tourist home, it doesn't violate the next door neighbors. And they would probably see less people here as a rental than if somebody rented it for full time. And, you know, we're applying additional standards to these people that we have not applied to other people. And what I don't like about this is that the very first comment here was that, you know, I'm Dick McNear's daughter, I live next door. And then these people have different last names than what we're used to. And it sure does feel like we're applying different standards to these people. And we're somewhat, as an administrative position here, we got standards to go by and we can say no. But when this looks like so many other applications that we've approved, be very careful turning this thing down. These people paid $850,000 for this property, I believe. And, you know, they got rights that everybody else in this county has rights for. And I'm not gonna violate their rights or in a vote that brings up a lot of other things that don't exist. This is equal to what we've done for many other people. So we need to look at that main house, well, septic, fire, these kind of things, and send this on to the BZA for their consideration.
Okay, and I'll just say that any tourist home application that I've ever reviewed where the location of the dwelling, and I can think of one in Harris Hollow, location of the dwelling undermined the land buffer that would otherwise protect neighboring properties. I've been consistent on that. So these are general standards that.
That one you referred to, how big was that site size?
It was smaller.
4 acres?
I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, I think it was 4 acres.
Yeah. But no, I mean, these general standards are here as a measure for whether or not a special use or a special exception permit should be granted. And so they are valid and they are general standards. They're not special standards. And anyway, I'm just.
But here, how do you justify changing the standards for these people that you have applied to many other properties? And here, change the standards and say no, that we've approved many more times before.
Right, I mean,
that's how you walk into a lawsuit. We already got a situation in Amosville that we've dealt with, and we got a situation we had up here off of 211. This is not right what we're getting ready to do here.
May I speak, Mr. Henry? I appreciate where you're coming. Thank you very much. I appreciate where you're coming from, and I also feel that it's important to be fair across the board with all applicants, and we are looking at the use of the property, not at the applicant, and that's the way it should always be. And I really applaud hearing that said because I agree with that 100%. My only concern, as I said, I have seen us approve, not always with my vote, but often. If we're just looking at the house, we've approved many like this. But where I would differ with you, if I may, is that I don't think it's appropriate to just look at the house. We need to look at the totality of the property, even though we might limit, although the application hasn't actually limited it to the house, we might choose to limit our recommendation to the house, that's true. But I, on this particular property, am concerned about the potential use of these outbuildings because they are unusual. And from the application and just from the nature of the design of these outbuildings, I think it would be hard to enforce an appropriate use of the outbuildings. So what I hear the applicant's representatives say is they're working to resolve any issues with those somewhat unusual design of the outbuildings. And that's fine with me. And if they were resolved so that it looked like, yeah, this could work out, I'd be 100% behind supporting this application and have no problem with it. But that is where my concern lies at the moment, just to clarify.
I have a question now. So your concern is with the tent or with the shed, and the camper as well?
My concern, and maybe I appreciate being pinned down on it because I have to pin it down some in my mind. I'd like to have clarity of what intended use would the equestrian facility would be, because that strikes me as an invitation to have large events there and parties. So that would be question number one. And then the yurt looks like it could be used as a sleeping accommodation. That would be question number two. those seating areas are fine. They're not in full repair, but I assume you could take care of that. I don't see any particular objections to those. The camper, again, people can have campers on their property. It would just want to be clear that that's not going to be used as part of the rental. So there are just questions still around the number of outbuildings and those. It would be nice to have the application come in with clearly stating exactly what's going to be what, and just to see the property in a condition where I think the neighbors would not be adversely affected by it. It's well kept, well put together, would increase my comfort level on this. But I agree, it's not on its face simply the proximity of the house to the adjacent property. We do approve those. I certainly have seen that. I would agree with that.
One way you might address the problem is simply to lock all those buildings so that they couldn't be, so that the only available building to the renters is the house.
I'm sorry, but I feel like we're getting a little off track with the focus on the buildings. I think the buildings are part of the picture, but going back to the point of the general standards and how the plan for the site and the facility would govern the use, the fact that there are kind of picnic facilities across that could accommodate large numbers, the distribution of the facilities does go to the visual and the use impacts beyond just whether the buildings are locked or not. I think the fact that it's not outside of our purview to note that there are these distributed play areas, if you will, around the property that, according to the application, would be part of the use of the guests. And they can't do anything about that, frankly, because it's going to be rented. I don't know how you would lock those pavilions. So to me, to zero in too much, I'm sorry, I don't agree with my colleague that our focus is on a legal review of the explicit standards. Our view is about the use of the property and how harmonious it is with the surrounding property. And on that measure, I think we're perfectly within our rights to consider these factors. And frankly, the fact that we discussed many times that we haven't even met the owner and applicant. Not only are they not resident, but I do think there's some significant differences here that give me pause as to the clarity and appropriate overall use of this property in this form that is unique and not something we've seen in other applications. And for those reasons, I agree with my colleague, Mr. Kier.
Well,
Mr. Whitson, sorry.
when you look at this picture right here, there's a fence that we see right there that's between the house and these improvements. And we have approved these homes and put conditions on them more stringent than what's been recommended to us, and also what has not been more stringent than what was in the application. And they can have whatever they want to in that field. That yurt is just basically a tent on a platform. Yeah. So that's a temporary improvement that can disappear.
But it is there, so that's where I disagree with you. The fact that it could disappear is fine. It is there. It is part of the site as it's being presented to us, and therefore I think it's within our right to look at it.
So,
if it were gone, then we could say, okay, no additional structures to contain the distribution of the use. But because it's there, I think it's appropriate for us to
but we have
consider.
a right to say that our approval is only for the main house, for use of the main house as a tourist home. No other improvements can be used.
I agree with that. That is within our right. And to me, then the question becomes the question of really, is this enforceable and
Sure,
other
it's enforceable.
questions.
It's enforceable equal to all the approvals we do. All our approvals are enforceable. If they're not.
Well, that's true, but we also have denied applications on the basis of the challenge of kind of tempted compliance issues that we'll have a hard time enforcing. And this property is full of those.
Sorry. So let's go back to their application here.
Use the short term, the very first paragraph, I think, on page 2 of the application. Well, the 3 paragraphs on page 2, Michelle, you bring those up, I think it's a fair summary of what they're seeking to do, and I think it would be helpful. Up to 8 occupants at a time may request renting the property through third party, vacation rental lodging websites. Furnished 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 2.5-story residential dwelling for up to 8 occupants. And then, so just to be clear, we're calling the other building the recreational building?
Yeah, we weren't aware that it was actually an accessory building, so, the initial intent was to have it as like a game room. So that's the intent for that, and that's the intent was created.
Am I correct though, when you
Yes.
came in last month though, you were talking about that would be an extension of I thought you were proposing that people could sleep there as well.
We initially thought that, but,
But once
I
you
was
learned-
informed that it,
okay.
it's not,
I got it.
not included in
Okay.
bedroom.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, and I would note that the first
So it would be
paragraph,
only 6 people.
sorry, and to the earlier point, the first paragraph, 4-bedroom house with use of the yards, yurt, and recreational building on the property. So to me, that brings those structures into this application. It's, that right there is what makes it different.
So we have a right to say no to that sentence. You take the second
True,
paragraph.
if we
and mark
want
through
to,
it, and say no
but
to
we
it.
also have a history of kind of not rewriting applications, but I take your point, we could choose to conditionally approve with that, I agree with that.
So why don't we give them the same opportunities that we give other clients instead of saying no to them? Why?
Well, I think, I for one would certainly listen to any motion presented by any of my colleagues as to something that might move this forward.
Brian, do you have anything you want to add? We kind of skipped you at the
No,
beginning.
I'm fine
Okay.
at this moment.
I mean, to some extent, some of these concerns could be taken care of by just limiting the maximum to 6 people. I mean, that goes a long way, but, again, the condition of the property and the nature of a lot of sort of buildings in disrepair. I mean, I can envision other properties that would have farm buildings in disrepair that we probably wouldn't have a problem with. It's just that these buildings look like they're intended for recreational use by visitors. I think that's what gives me pause, and they're gonna,
And that's frankly what I heard you say earlier, which gave me pause over that collection of stuff down there. Setting aside whether or not they were permitted by the county or not, it just it's written in the plan, and then you mentioned that would be somehow part of the overall service offering.
Yeah, so when we initially completed the application, I'm pretty sure we were, told to put all of whatever's on the property, put it in the application. So that's just why it's in there. They are willing to, adjust anything, if that helps.
Make a motion that we postpone this application for a month. There seems to be some confusion on what
Yeah,
is going on. I think we need to postpone this for a month and have it back on the agenda next month.
Would that be a motion to
Yes, sir, that's-
table?
to table it.
Table it?
Table it.
Okay. A motion to table it.
I'll second that, just for the purpose of.
Discussion.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to go back to the health department comments, which the house was originally approved for a 3-bedroom septic. The septic was enlarged, and then it states that the main house occupancy be limited to 4 people, and the accessory building be limited to 300 gallons. I don't know how 300 gallons is basically sounds like 2 bedrooms to me, but,
So, may I insert here?
yeah, please.
Their, operational permit from the health department was for 3 bedrooms, which is 6 people, and that's what I have put in my staff report in the conditions, that it'd be limited to 6 people. So I think that takes care of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. But it says here, 4 people and 300
Yeah,
gallons.
but in the staff recommendation, she's saying
Okay.
limit.
And Mr. Henry, thank you for that motion. I would only ask just for the benefit of the applicant and their representative, if you had anything in mind that they would do during the interim period.
I
Just-
think, so I guess, is the commission concerned about the yurt?
Well, actually, if I may.
Yeah.
To the point earlier, there's some disconnect between if the main house is limited to 4 and they can have up to 6, is sort of a mystery as to where the other 2 would go.
Did you see the staff, did you see Medge's letter? Medge has a letter, put that letter up.
Yeah, but I'm saying this report,
I think, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Medge's letter say that you could break it up a number of ways,
Yeah,
but,
but we can't technically can't do
Right.
that, so.
right,
we're-
so,
you
so
could do-
the point is that even that, I guess what we were looking at before was the staff report. It implies that 2 people are going to stay somewhere other than the main dwelling, which, based on what we're discussing today,
They're not.
it wouldn't be allowed. So I think those are all part of that's all part of what I think needs to be cleaned up before I would be ready to approve
So
something.
this property is in land use, and they have those buildings down there, and they did chicken houses and greenhouses, and they did slaughter of animals. So all those little utility sheds that they had agriculture uses, and it's in land use. The only building, if you have a question about, is that yurt. Do you want the yurt to disappear? What do you want to do with the yurt? Are you worried about the yurt?
I want the use as a tourist home to be circumscribed such that it doesn't bother the neighbors. That's what I'm looking for, so that it does not violate the conditions, the general requirement standards. And that is up to the applicant. What is presented now, what is before us, does not, to me, sufficiently prescribe that.
Because it basically says that everything in the front field is kind of in play
Available as,
for recreational use. So,
But do you all have a problem with the yurt being used at all? I mean, honestly, I went in that yurt, it was hot as hell, and it was not a warm day. So I can't imagine anybody sleeping there, but I guess if you were determined, but is that what we're worried about?
no, they're not talking, it's just, Gary Light's point is that there's a collection of these outbuildings and a camper and a yurt.
But
And it's all in the application, referenced kind of in passing.
Yeah.
As
Well-
part of the overall service offering to overnight guests.
yeah.
Not necessarily to sleep, but to use. And so you can hear some concern, not unanimous, but some concern about the adverse effect on the neighbors. And so that's the point, is how would you recraft the application to provide those who are skeptical with some confidence that,
I suggest to you that you all consider maintaining activities for your tenants to the other side of the fence, the house side of the fence. Use that fence as a barrier, no use of the big accessory building. And I can't remember whether there's any landscape buffer between you and your neighbors towards 211, but y'all might consider planting some trees there. I can't remember whether there was trees there as a screening, a screening that will grow up and help.
And just one other comment about the yurt, if I may. Part of the reason that this is relevant is if in fact the idea is that people could spend the night in the yurt, now we're talking about a campground. And that's a different
Yeah, we're
thing.
not-
So
we're-
this
we're
is,
actually
this
not.
is what we're trying to do, is clarify and circumscribe the use so that we understand what we're talking about.
There may be, you may have in your file, or the settlement file, a survey that shows the house and this accessory building. There's a surveyor that doesn't work out there since they determined the setbacks on the building. So you might have a survey that has the house location on it. You might use that and propose in a revised sketch to us that we can help better understand and define where the use is gonna be.
Okay. Thank you.
You're gonna have a video available for you to look at,
No, I understand.
and, maybe you wanna get legal counsel to help you,
Yeah.
okay?
Thank you.
On a much more mundane level, when we passed amendments to the tourist home provisions several months ago, we included provisions that we often overlook or we don't choose not to include about, as I brought up before, emergency numbers, and we don't have a provision there for fire extinguishers. I know the BZA sometimes looks into those issues and includes those, but, you know, those kinds of issues about having fire extinguishers. And we also have a provision that I've never seen us use, which is having $500,000 of liability insurance, and
That's not us.
just one of those things that we chose to put into the ordinance. So you know, I don't know, we've never used that, and I'm not sure when it's appropriate, but the presence of attractive nuisance outbuildings potentially just brings that to my mind. So anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second to table. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the table, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Any opposed? Thanks.
The good news to you is you got another month to work this out. The bad news for you is after you get done with us, you go to the BZA and they're twice as bad as we are. Yeah.
And I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. You've been very professional. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right. All right. We will take a 5-minute break if that's okay. Thanks. Okay, this is our third and final public hearing for tonight, and this is a somewhat arcane one. I'm not surprised that,
It's a preliminary review.
no, we have another public hearing.
Oh, the ordinance.
Yep, and so this is a ordinance amendment to section 170-55, which is a section involving applications for zoning permits. And the background here is that everyone on the planning commission knows, but I'll just say it for the benefit of the public. We have on the books this process by which the planning commission has a preliminary review of applications. And then once that preliminary review is complete, in some cases, we've been sending applications on to the Board of Zoning Appeals with a recommendation for approval without having a public hearing. So Mr. Light put some work into some changes to 170-55 to effectively eliminate the preliminary review extra step, which means that if we adopted this ordinance as drafted, and we can look at it in a second, basically once the zoning administrator, once the zoning administrator deems an application complete, as long as it is 16 days in advance of our next regular planning commission meeting, it will trigger a public hearing at the planning commission, which means that in all cases, special exceptions, special use permit applications, we will have a public hearing while eliminating the funny in-between step that seemed to not be working very well. With that, this was advertised, and also the proposed change to the zoning ordinance was out for public review. And if anyone is interested to speak, this is the time. And once this is over, we'll just pull up the language and we'll take a vote. Does anyone wish to speak? Yes, Ms. Ramos, Hampton District.
Well, twice in one night. The only thing I want to say is that 16 days, if you're telling the neighbors and you've only got 16 days till the meeting, it doesn't give people a whole lot of time to react. Snail mail is getting slower. And you don't have any other ways of contacting people. So I'd almost see if you could extend it a little bit more. Also, the fact that your staff has to get out letters, and who knows, it could be 5 letters, or it could be 15, or who knows how many letters you've got to get out to let the neighbors know that there's somebody making an application. So I would like to see it maybe a little bit longer, 7 days or something like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Makala, Jackson District.
Yeah. And in this case, Chairman of the BZA, because basically our board is involved in this process, and it will affect us as same will affect you. The problem I see is that with the BZA, we've actually gone in the other direction, because we found that we were having, our public hearings were being scheduled for us, and we would get into the public hearing and suddenly these problems started coming up. And it puts you in a situation where we have to recess the public hearing, because there are questions that need to be answered in order to make a qualified decision on the application. So this is a problem. And the other thing I see is that as far as the public goes, we don't do a great job in this county of notifying the public on these applications to begin with. It's basically strictly with the one local newspaper, and that's it. So it's very easy for people to not become aware of the applications. So if it immediately goes to a public hearing, the public knows nothing about it. And it's going to be, how are they going to, just like was being said, how are they going to be notified and have the availability of information in order to come to a public hearing and either support it or object to it? So you're going to have a public hearing, and in your case, and you probably won't get anybody here, but that doesn't mean that there's not public interest. It's just they're not even aware of the issue, coming up. So I mean, I understand the reasoning behind it is we're trying to speed the process up, so that it's and also I think another consideration that has been talked about is that, particularly on public hearings, is that if it's a situation where an individual has to be represented by counsel, counsel has to be at each one of these public hearings, and there's a cost associated with that. And it's kind of, the public hearings tend to be somewhat repetitious. So it's a burden. At times it can be a burden on the applicant from that standpoint. But, I don't know exactly what the answer is, but I don't think this approach is going to, be beneficial, particularly to the public, because like I said, public hearing is their chance to chime in, and you're going to be limiting that because of lack of ability to contact them or whatever. So I think that's, like I said, right now with the BZA, we are doing exactly what you have been doing, is that when we know an application's coming in now, I will tomorrow tell Michelle to put the application, well, no, actually I won't, because you tabled it. I would have put the application that you just went through on our agenda for a preliminary look. So if we have questions, the applicant can be aware of that, so then when we have the public hearing, the applicant is aware of questions we're going to be asking or whatever, and they can find answers. Or as board members, you have questions, and it gives you time to go out and look for answers. So you can proceed however you want, but I just don't think it's going to be an effective way of dealing with the situation.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? Nobody waiting outside to come in to comment? Okay, all right, thanks. I'll close the public comment part of this. Mr. Light, since you tackled this, do you want to, first of all, I should note that the file names are a little confusing. I mentioned this either Mr. Henry or Mr. Light. So in our agenda, there's just so we're all working from the same document. Michelle, you can pull up not version 2. Version 2 logically would be the most up to date, but it's not. So the one below that has the language that was altered slightly under paragraph E. This is a slight change from where we ended up after reviewing Mr. Light's good work. Applications deemed complete by the zoning administrator at least 16 days prior to the next regular monthly planning commission meeting will be placed on the agenda for public hearing advertised in accordance with that provision of the Code of Virginia, which is what we've always done. So everything else that's in track changes here, we all agreed upon, and it was just that one slight change in paragraph E that came after we concluded last time. And this again was on public display for inspection, so.
And what is version 2?
No, forget about version 2.
Oh.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Okay.
So this is the not version 2. It's the last attachment in the agenda. So, I think it makes sense. I understand the concern about 16 days, but we wouldn't notice the public hearing any differently than we do now. And with the preliminary review, it only has the effect of, I guess, potentially putting out there for a longer period of time, the public awareness that something is going on a zoning matter.
So, Matt?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the points that the public commenters raised, I think, are certainly valid ones. I know we went back and forth on, when I first drafted this, whether 16 days was right. The conversation that we had about 16 days was premised on the notion that the hearing would be at the next available meeting. One obvious change that would skip the preliminary review but still skip the automatic 2-meeting review but address the quick time would be to have the hearing scheduled for the meeting after the next meeting. So that would essentially give a 16 plus 30 day notice for the notification without having us convene, get the applicant in for another meeting. So if that is a concern, which I think it's a valid point, a potential fix would be to simply keep the notice language as it is and schedule the hearing for the meeting after the next one.
16 days prior to.
Well, the application would be still 16 days prior to the meeting, but then
Will be placed on the agenda for
public hearing at the next, we have to work on the words, but the
Yeah.
idea would be you'd schedule a hearing another month out. That would address the timing without getting us a second meeting.
Okay, so speaking of hearings, if we make that change, we're going to have to, yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
One note, if we can't get it, that we have to comply with the state code as far as advertisement and notices, so if we can't meet that, it's automatically gonna go to the next line. We're not gonna do anything any different.
So this at least, what you're saying then is it's gonna turn out the way I'm describing it anyway in many cases.
Correct.
So why don't we just admit that, not have ourselves set up for a time frame that we're gonna fail every time anyway, and just schedule it 2 meetings out.
Well, actually, now that I read it again, after Michelle's explanation, it doesn't say for public hearing at the next meeting. It doesn't say that. It says it says what you just described. 16 days prior to the next regular monthly planning commission meeting will be placed on the agenda, doesn't say which agenda, on the agenda for public hearing advertised in accordance with the Code of Virginia. So it's fine.
So we could still just schedule it.
I think we were inferring from the first mention of the next regular monthly planning commission meeting that it would therefore be a public hearing at the next meeting.
Frankly, that's what I thought we were
Yeah,
talking
well,
about,
I
but
just read it
think we
again
can-
with your explanation, it helps a lot. It doesn't mean that. Okay.
So we could schedule it for the meeting 2 hours, which I think.
It'll have to meet the Code of Virginia provision on public notice, and it's only setting next regular monthly meeting as the kind of the trigger for the scheduling of a public hearing and the related advertising. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Yeah, Mr. Kohler.
Can we require that we get a sign in front of a property? I mean, don't you think we should be sophisticated enough to be able to do
I
that?
think we don't need to put that in the code, that can be a policy, internal policy, but we have to get them first, we have to have something
Yeah, because they're just blanks, you just fill in the
Or then
blank,
to place it
special
there,
use
yeah.
permit, special exception permit, just write it in indelible ink and public notice.
What do I
That would be
remember?
nice.
It's on 211 right now in Fauquier County.
Yeah.
There's a stack of them. There's also one
There's a
on
lot of
Collins
Hill.
Farm.
But that doesn't need to be part of the ordinance.
Right, I agree. Okay, any other comments on these revisions, proposed revisions? And if we all agree, or a majority agree, we'd move this on to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation.
I'm fine with the language,
Me too.
but I did want to address Mr. Macklow's concerns. They're valid concerns, and I'd like to have it clear what we're after here. What I think we're after is that, actually, the BZA at their last meeting did a preliminary review activity that I was not uncomfortable with. I am uncomfortable with how we've been handling our preliminary reviews because of that we do two things at them. One, we allow an applicant to speak without having invited the public or noticed the public. So that, in my opinion, through no fault of the applicants, gives them an undue advantage, if you will, or a platform that we haven't provided to the general public necessarily. And we also use that preliminary review many times as a decision point. And so without having provided the public an opportunity to comment through notice, we are making, even if our decision is just a recommendation, it carries weight, or should carry weight. And so that's a decision point, and to do that through a preliminary review without public notice, I don't think is the right way to do it. So I don't have a problem if we, as a matter of procedure or whatever, did what you did, which is have a preliminary review, which is purely a staff, because commissioners can't meet together with the zoning administrator as a body, except in a public setting, through a public meeting. I think what you did was probably fine, which is that it's just a conversation between staff and the commissioners saying, hey, we would like to see this additional document, or what about this? But to invite the applicant also to be part of that discussion and to use that as a decision-making on the merits opportunity, that's what I find problematic. And so what we're doing in this, I'm also okay with, is we are saying whenever we essentially have a decision on the merits, it's going to be through public notice and comment. I think that's the appropriate way to go.
Yeah.
Now, if we also want to have a preliminary review in addition to that, whatever, that's fine, I see your point, but I support this language as written.
Right, I mean, it has a practical effect if you think about it, where we'll always have a public hearing at the planning commission, period, always.
And we could do it.
And we weren't necessarily doing that because,
Yeah, if it's available before the previous meeting, even if it's not on the agenda, someone could add it to the agenda if upon reviewing it, they have an issue that they'd like to discuss.
Good
with
point.
the other commissioners. So in a way, this kind of delayed hearing gives us an opportunity as the exception to talk about it at the first meeting.
What's amazing is that for decades, this is the way we did it.
I know, that's it.
I know, who changed
That's
it?
right. But that's
I
what
think it was always
gonna
written this way, we just didn't do it this way.
What happened?
I don't know.
Yeah. Michelle, I just want to ask a mathematical I don't know if it's math, but, okay, so it's the 18th of May, and this goes to the question of public notice. So it's the 18th of May, and let's say you receive an application for Acme Tourist Home on the 2nd, which would be 16 days prior to the 18th. The Code of Virginia then says you have to make public notice how many times and when. I'm just trying to think of an example because.
2 times,
2 times
2 weeks.
for 2 weeks.
Once a week, 2 weeks.
Okay, so,
So the public hearings that were advertised, or that were held tonight were advertised on,
4th and the 11th.
yeah, I'm looking right now, May 2nd.
actually I advertised them for,
Mr. Chairman, as you're looking at that, I would like to raise one other point, if I may, before you schedule it. I didn't interrupt.
Well, no, so if you got an application on the 2nd, you could rush in an advertisement
yep,
on the 5th and the 12th, and then we could have a public hearing on the 18th.
yes.
So I mean, just take me as an example, it doesn't do what you were,
In the
it
mail.
wouldn't bounce to June.
Well, but it would if we make that a matter of standard procedure. What we're saying is, there's nothing here that requires us to do it at the next meeting.
That's correct.
So we could still, if we advise and would adopt through other measures, say, let's always schedule it with at least 30 days before the hearing, then we can still be compliant.
I don't think I'm gonna get too many cutting it that close. And sometimes when I let people know, okay, now that I have everything I need, this is the date we're looking at, I'm not gonna be in town, can we go help the next one?
Okay.
That does
All
happen
right.
a lot.
Yeah, so I think as long as it remains that way, then
We
we're fine.
can schedule it.
Yeah, okay, all right, sorry.
No, I
No, you're
interrupted,
good.
I apologize, that was great, that was a good clarification. I also, because this does impact the public hearing notice and the question of, scheduling public hearings, I do think at some point, ideally before we send it up to the board, but that may not work, that our legal counsel does look at this and verify that we are meeting our notice and hearing requirements under the code, because there are some very specific things, even in addition to this particular provision. I know we have Mr. Luke's prior opinion on this, which indicates that we have the ability at the planning commission level to have a public hearing so essentially we're therefore requiring a public hearing for an applicant twice. And I also have the opportunity to look at a couple other jurisdictions that also do that currently. So it appears to be legit, but I think it's worth just having our legal counsel give
Yeah.
them
Look at this ad or look at every application?
No, look at this provision.
Just the provision.
Yeah, and,
Oh.
yeah, Mr. Goff reviewed, Mr. Curry's draft,
Yeah.
and it's gonna go to the Board of Supervisors, so Mr. Goff will review it again, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone wanna put forward a motion on this? And this would be a recommendation that the, Board of Supervisors, I think, approve the amended ordinance language as presented.
I'll move that we move this change in the ordinance here to, as written, to the Board of Supervisors for their review and approval.
With a recommendation for approval?
A recommendation for approval.
Okay, great. Is there a second to Mr. Kohler's motion?
I second.
Thank you. Ms. Ritter, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Great, thanks. And apologies to Mr. Ryan. Sorry, we try to move, we try to move things along. All right, so this is our one item of new business, and this is a preliminary review. This is a special exception permit, application number 22-05-01, last name Ryan, tax map number 50-31A, and this is an application for more than one dwelling on a parcel of land, which does require a special exception. And Ms. Summers, on this, if you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us the context, and then we'll go from there.
So Mr. and Mrs. Ryan requested a special exception to construct a second dwelling on a property located at 530 Eagles Nest Lane pursuant to 17036A. The property is 87.54 acres in size and its own conservation. The proposed second dwelling is for their son, the Ryan's son, and grandchildren, and other visiting family and friends. The current home on the property is a one-bedroom cabin. And VDOT commented they have no issues with the location where Eagles Nest Lane connects to State Route 626. The health department commented that the existing system serves a one-bedroom septic that was installed and approved in 1993. They have had a soil evaluation done, and therefore that would have to be submitted to the health department to actually get the construction permit. They have the option of applying to drill a separate well to serve the second dwelling if they wish to do so, but again, they would have to go through the health department for those construction permits. I will note that the property is in a Virginia outdoor easement.
Great. Mr. Ryan, is there anything you want to?
I think first of all, thanks to the Summers for all of the
support and help in as we went through this application process with questions that started a few years back when we had grandchildren, which we still do, by the way.
And they still have grandparents, which is also very
If you
good.
build it.
So when we put and we added a piece to the Virginia Outdoor Conservation easement, and when we put in the language of that original easement, we included the option to add an additional dwelling by or for our son, we have one child, and for a grandchild. So that's was the impetus behind now having a married son and 3 grandchildren.
Okay.
So and the preliminary idea, the thought was that it would be very close to the existing cabin, sort of a family unit, if you will. And hopefully, based on the well that we had dug 700 or 800 feet a number of years ago,
Wow.
we have a sufficient flow that I think, unless all of us take showers at the same time, I think we'll be okay. So the idea is to also use the same, have it in the same well.
Great.
And there was a question, I think, about approval or from the BOF, and I made some Xeroxes of one of the maps that was done on.
Right, right. And I think I recall seeing that you weren't sure that beyond this, that there would even be purpose in getting any additional legal opinion from VOF.
No, I
And-
that,
Are you still involved with VOF?
No, sadly, I'm not on the board.
Okay.
when we redid and updated the easement, BOF put in some general maps to what we could do as far as logging, what the slopes were, and so forth and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is the general quote building area.
Okay. Mr. Henry, do you have any questions at all? Mr. Light?
I have a question, I'm not sure it's for the applicant, but I'm a little stuck on whether this necessarily needs to be here. I'm trying to reconcile this with the accessory dwelling unit provisions,
This is 2 dwellings on a single parcel.
but so is that.
Right, so
Yeah.
this
So-
doesn't restrict the location within 200 feet of the main dwelling or the size limitation of the square footage.
But the existing structure is already smaller than 2,000, and from what I've heard, it's within the restrictions, so it strikes me that maybe this is a hypothetical that we don't need to address, but if this existing structure were to become an accessory dwelling unit, and the other one would become the primary, would we even be doing this?
Well, yeah, because it still requires a permit.
You still need the permit to put a second one. That
Yes.
was the part I was
Yes.
But that would
not
be a
able to
special-
trace.
That would be a special use permit versus a special exception.
Okay, so we're just taking it down slightly different paths for that. but-
Correct.
Yeah, it's a waiving of I guess it's a density provision. It's 1 dwelling on a parcel
Yeah,
and waiving
I
that.
think when I chatted with our attorney who helped us with I thought that to have a second dwelling more than a family apartment size, it requires.
1,200 square
Well, we
feet.
did modify that, which is why this is kind of
Yeah.
front of mind. We no longer limit it to family use. It's just a size, which is good. But you're under the size. The interesting thing
Yeah.
is that the new building would be bigger, but why does the new one have to be the accessory and the existing? Yeah, who knows? But it's neither here nor there if you're willing to go down this track. More to the point, perhaps, my only concern, well, 2 things. I tried to drive up there. I'm never confident enough to just keep going on that road long enough to figure out where this is. So I need some help with that at some point. My only question and concern about this with respect to comprehensive plan provisions is it is sort of at the top of, I suspect, or I understand that it is, and I would want to pay some attention to visibility clearing from a ridgetop standpoint to a degree that I haven't been able to do because I don't know the more precise location of the property. And in that sense, I think it sounds like you've got an idea of where the other site would be, but if there's a ridge top and visibility question about this, I might be interested in talking about where exactly the other property is going to be. So those are my only sort of thoughts that I'll be grappling with between now and the time we talk about it, but that's all.
Okay, anyone else?
Well, I think the application is really well done and totally complete and really impressive. And I was glad that you were able to find some soil up there.
It is, yeah, we're trying to have the progress. If we couldn't find the soil, it's interesting as so many ridges on the west side, all of the Laurel and the rockiness, and on the east side is deep soil.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Old million-year-old volcanoes gradually erode.
Well, I also was impressed by the modesty of both the existing structure and the proposed structure, just in terms of the landscape.
Working with the VOF too, we're not going to have a 5,000-foot, 5-bedroom unit lit up at night.
Right. Okay, anyone else?
Well, just briefly, we're doing a special exception on this. Is this
Right.
because it's the distance is too great, or one of the houses is too large, or where are we?
Number of dwellings on a single parcel.
That alone wouldn't do it, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
it's gotta do-
Mr. Witchen, because an accessory dwelling unit is also a case where there's two dwelling units on a parcel. I think the distinction here is that they're not, by going this path, they're not constrained by the size limits, although they seem to be prepared to meet them on the existing structure, if not the new one. We don't have to get into which does it apply to, the existing one or the new one. But it definitely alleviates the need for it to be within the 200 feet as for the accessory.
That was my only question.
This is, hypothetical, that doesn't apply to this application, but I would like to understand at some point, that provision, does it mean that if he had, he's got the acreage, so it doesn't matter, but if there was only 40 acres, could you put two houses even though you normally couldn't? I don't know how that would work, but he has the acreage, so I don't think it's hypothetical in this case. But I would say that I think that this is, this is a really good application too. I think the fact again that you've placed this in a VOF restriction, those restrictions seem pretty comprehensive, having looked at them fairly closely on this. For protecting the kind of necessary resources that we would want to protect, I think, and therefore pretty consistent with the comprehensive plan. And I also think that, again, as I said earlier, we ought to reward people or applicants for having taken the step of putting things in an easement, and I think that's great.
Thank you, staff and the Summers for helping me immensely by emails and things that what else I needed, and so forth and so on. So.
Well, that's great. Yeah, obviously we have to follow our rules and procedures, but to the extent that we can accommodate uses that are very appropriate with our comprehensive plan, that's what this seems to me to be. I appreciate your offer that the motion sensors be placed on outside lights, and that would be part of the application. I would also, and this may actually be required, but I don't know, that all outdoor lights be down shielded again, just because of the visibility up there.
Not that you would know anything about that.
I have a telescope, so I'm aware.
Yeah, got it. So yeah, I don't really have, this would be one, if I didn't have the concern of, as I just already expressed about public hearings and not wanting this to serve as a decision point, this would be one of the ones that I would just recommend moving forward. But I do have that concern, so others may not, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else?
I just have a comment. I have a tendency just to read the information as Michelle presents it to me, although she informed me that she doesn't give it to me in any particular order. So I read the first VOF easement and was struck by the condition that no permanent or temporary building or structure shall be built other than one existing single-family home, upkeep, expansion, whatever. 2, one additional single-family dwelling which may be constructed only by the son or any grandchild of you and your wife. I thought that was the most bizarre language in an easement I've ever seen, because that gave you no ability to do anything, the way I read it. But then your amended VOF cleans that up.
Cleaned it up a bit, yes.
I just thought that was strange.
Well, we're keeping it all in the family one.
Right. But to exclude yourself just seemed very, very strange. I thought you were kind of I thought you were in trouble right off the bat.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so, speaking of preliminary reviews, so I guess we can go one of two routes. We can move this on, it would go to the Board of Supervisors, or if you feel there's a need for a public hearing here at the Planning Commission, we could schedule that, so I'll leave it to,
I'll make a motion that we move it on to the Board of Supervisors for their approval.
with a recommendation for approval.
Yes.
Okay, that's Mr. Henry. Is there a second to his motion?
I second.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ritter. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, thank you.
I abstain.
You abstain? Okay. All right, so, so we'll see you at the Board of Supervisors.
Which,
I'll be-
summer, pardon?
I'll be in touch.
Okay.
She'll be in touch. It always, we do things that is like talk to Ms. Summers. Okay,
Summer.
great. Thanks.
Summer vacation.
Thanks for your patience tonight. It's always tough to manage everything all at once. Thanks a lot. Okay, I think we can wrap this up quickly. I just had an update. We learned from the Berkeley group that they would like to present their, the results of their diagnostic review of our ordinance at 6 p.m. on June 1st.
Not gonna work.
Okay.
I'd have to do that by Zoom.
How about, can you do it by Zoom?
Let me just make
Are
sure.
they gonna be here or on Zoom?
Yeah, I'm gonna be in Maine, so it worked last time.
Okay. Yeah, so Mr. Kohler, you can't be here.
I'm gonna be in North Carolina.
Okay. How about Al, do you? Yep. I'm sorry? Okay, I can be here.
I can be here.
Okay. Yeah, I'd just like to have a physical quorum
Yeah.
for whatever. Brian? Okay, great. So that's 6 p.m. on June 1st, which is a Wednesday. And since it sounds like we would have a physical quorum, barring anything between now and then, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion then that we continue this meeting to 6 p.m. June 1st here in the Rappahannock County Courthouse.
I guess the only thing I would like to, oh, I'm sorry, I know you asked for a motion, but
No, that's fine.
I have some, I want to make sure we're fine with rules, and we went through this whole thing about virtual participation.
Uh-huh.
And I've already participated in
You-
a virtual meeting once.
You can participate in up to 25% of meetings of a public body in a calendar year.
Okay.
I'm keeping track. You're fine.
Terrific, thank you very much.
Actually, I'm not sure that's what our rules say. That may be the board's rules.
No, it's not. It's not. It's a Code of Virginia.
Rules of procedure.
Yeah, the Code of Virginia allows
We
for
can waive
like,
the rules of procedure if we need to.
yeah,
so.
but
That was part of the rule, and we can waive it.
but yeah, the Code of Virginia allows up to 25% of meeting. You can participate
I'm not gonna
electronically.
belabor the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you're fine.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to continue this meeting to June 1st at 6 p.m. in the Rappahannock County Courthouse.
Also move.
Okay, a second.
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Ritter. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks a lot.